The signal came through the comms like a faint whisper at first, desperate, broken, and filled with fear. But it didn't take long for the message to sharpen into clarity, its contents searing through the silence of the deep space corridor. Help! Please, urgently, SOS. Calrigar. Commander Elias Walker didn't need to hear the rest. He had been tracking the alien warlord Calrigar's forces for weeks now. The name alone sent a chill down his spine. The Calrigar were a vicious race, relentless conquerors who burned worlds to ash and enslaved those they didn't wipe out. And now, they were coming for the unsuspecting Xylix, a small, isolated species light years from Earth's borders. SOS from a species you've never met before, Lieutenant Vericoil said, her voice steady but laced with a note of uncertainty. She tapped at the console, her fingers moving rapidly across the touchpad. They're asking for help. But why? Walker stood at the helm of the Eagle's Wrath, his battle-worn eyes narrowing as he gazed at the holographic map projected before him. The Xylix were a peaceful species, with no known military presence, yet their planet was on the edge of the Calrigar Empire's next target. The distress signal had reached the Eagle's Wrath after traveling through an uncharted asteroid field. Someone had gone out of their way to make sure it reached them. It didn't sit right with him. The Calrigar don't ask for help, Walker muttered. They take. They don't beg. A soft beat from the console interrupted the tension in the air. The signal was stronger now. More urgent. They needed to act, and fast. Plot a course to Xylix, Lieutenant. Coil's hands flew across the console again. Course plotted, Captain? Jump in 3, 2, 1. The ship shook slightly as the hyperdrive engaged, sending them racing through the vast void of space. Walker watched the stars stretch and warp as the ship leaped across light years. In just a few moments, they'd be on the edge of the Xylix system. And as they arrived, Walker knew this was no simple rescue. The Calrigar were always one step ahead. He couldn't help but feel the weight of his orders as the ship surged forward, his jaw tight. The Xylix, these strange and vulnerable aliens, had no idea what was coming for them. But I do. Commander, Coil said, her voice quieter now. Incoming transmission. It's the Xylix leadership. They've asked to speak with you. Put them through, Walker said, straightening, his fingers brushing the console. A hologram flickered to life before him. The figure of an alien materialized, small, with a delicate frame, and silvery skin that seemed to shimmer under the light. The alien's eyes were wide and pleading. Commander Walker. The Xylix leader's voice was soft, high-pitched, but there was an urgency beneath it. We did not know where to turn. The Calrigar have already breached our defenses. We are asking for your help, not out of weakness, but because we have nowhere else to go. We fear they will burn our world. The transmission flickered, the image warping as the transmission quality wavered. Walker's eyes scanned the alien's face. There was a raw desperation in their eyes. The Xylix had no military, no force to fight back. Yet they had sent this signal, knowing full well that the Calrigar wouldn't stop until they were all dead or enslaved. We're on our way, Walker replied, his voice as cold as the void around them. Get ready for war. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a sense of foreboding in the air. Walker turned back to the console and addressed the crew. We're not here to negotiate, he said, his voice hard. We're here to fight. His hands gripped the edge of the table as the reality of the situation sank in. The Calrigar weren't simply a threat, they were a force of nature. Their warships could slice through planetary shields like butter, and their soldiers were known for their brutal efficiency. But humanity had something the Xylix didn't, the ability to adapt, to fight back against impossible odds. And with the Eagle's Wrath and its fleet of battle-hardened soldiers, they would show the Calrigar that humanity would never bow. Ready all fighters, Walker ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. Prepare for combat. I want all systems on high alert. We're going to give these aliens something they'll never forget. As the ship neared the Xylix system, the battle readiness alarms blared. Walker's pulse quickened. His thoughts raced to his crew, the soldiers who had followed him into the darkest corners of the galaxy. He trusted them with his life. And now, they were all about to face one of their greatest challenges yet. A low rumble vibrated through the ship's hull as they emerged from hyperspace, the eerie glow of the Xylix planet visible in the distance. And ahead of them, the black shape of the Calrigar fleet slowly materialized from the dark expanse, dozens of warships blocking their path. The Calrigar had arrived. The ship shuddered again, and this time, Walker knew it wasn't just the Eagle's Wrath bracing for impact. It was everything that humanity had built up to this point. Every decision, every sacrifice, led to this. The Xylix were waiting for them, their fragile world hanging in the balance. Walker's eyes never left the fleet as he prepared for the fight of his life. It would not be just a rescue mission anymore. It would be humanity's defiance, a battle that would make the Calrigar understand that Deathworlders weren't to be underestimated. They asked for mercy, Walker said, his voice like steel. They should have asked for something they could survive. His eyes flashed to Coyle, who nodded grimly. Prepare to make them regret it, Commander. The first shot wasn't fired by the aliens, it was us. And that's why they're afraid. As the Eagle's Wrath raced toward the enemy fleet, Walker gripped his seat with determination. The fate of an entire species lay in his hands, and humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The Eagle's Wrath sliced through the void, its engines humming with the quiet power of a predator preparing to strike. The Xylix homeworld loomed ahead, a pale blue orb caught in the crushing grip of the Calrigar warships. Elias Walker stood at the helm, his fingers drumming against the cold surface of the control panel. The time for strategy had passed. Now, it was just a question of whether humanity could strike hard enough to turn the tide. Enemy fleet still holding formation, Coyle reported from her station, her fingers moving deftly across the holographic controls. At least 5 destroyers, 2 dreadnoughts. They've got a solid lock on the Xylix planet's orbit. Prepare the fleet, Walker ordered, his voice steady but carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many battles. Tell the squadron commanders we hit hard and fast. No holding back. The Eagle's Wrath was no stranger to combat. Walker's crew had faced countless engagements with ruthless, battle-hardened foes, but the Calrigar were different. They were a species born from war, designed to devastate and conquer. And they knew how to break their enemies before the first shot was fired. You think we've got the element of surprise? Coyle asked, glancing up from her station. These Calrigar are smart. They've probably already anticipated our move. They don't know us like they think they do, Walker replied. Humanity thrives on unpredictability. A loud beeping cut through the tension, and the viewport in front of them blinked to life with a glowing red alert. Incoming enemy fire! The proximity warning flashed. The Calrigar had already detected them. Shields up! Walker barked, his hands gripping the armrests of his command chair. All hands to battle stations! The moment the words left his mouth, the Eagle's Wrath lurched violently as enemy fire splashed across the ship's shields. The hull groaned in protest, but the ship held steady. Walker's eyes narrowed. Lock in on the nearest dreadnought, Walker ordered. Target their engines. Coyle worked fast, sending a volley of coordinates to the ship's weapons systems. The bright blue glow of the Eagle's Wrath's heavy plasma cannons flared to life, ripping through the dark vacuum of space. The first volley slammed into the side of the Calrigar dreadnought, but the enemy ship retaliated instantly, sending a barrage of energy blasts in return. Walker's heart pounded in his chest as the Eagle's Wrath shook from the impact. The external cameras showed flashes of energy rippling across the dreadnought's shields, sparks flying in all directions. They had to break its defenses, and quickly. Concentrate fire on the exposed thrusters, Walker commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. He knew if they could disable the engines, they'd have a shot at taking the dreadnought down, before the Calrigar could bring their full firepower to bear. Coyle adjusted the firing angle, and another salvo shot forward, this time landing squarely on the dreadnought's flank. The ship's engines erupted in a violent burst of light, a shockwave radiating out as its propulsion systems sputtered and went dark. Direct hit! Engines are down, Coyle reported, the strain in her voice evident. They're not going anywhere. Good. Now we need to hit the other one, Walker said. His eyes were fixed on the battle unfolding around them. Divide fire between the destroyers. We can't give them room to breathe. The battle raged on. The eagle's wrath twisted and turned in the void, dodging incoming fire, returning with its own, tearing through the Calrigar ranks with brutal precision. Walker's crew was working in perfect unison, a finely tuned machine that could execute complex maneuvers under extreme pressure. But for every enemy ship they took down, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Calrigar were relentless. We've got incoming reinforcements, Lieutenant Coyle shouted, her voice tight with urgency. At least 3 more Calrigar ships, closing in fast. The Xylex can't hold up much longer. Walker's gaze darted to the holographic display. The Xylex planet was starting to show signs of the inevitable, a slow, creeping destruction. Calrigar ships launched waves of dropships and bombardment rounds, raining destruction down on the helpless planet below. Every second counted. We can't wait for the Xylex to fall, Walker muttered, his mind racing. We've got one shot at this. If we don't act now, this entire system is lost. He slammed his fist against the console. All ships were going in. We're making a final push. Full throttle. The crew's response was immediate. The fleet, what was left of it, closed in around the Eagle's wrath, its ships taking up formation as they dove straight into the heart of the Calrigar fleet. The remaining destroyers hung like predators, circling, watching for the moment they would pounce. Walker's plan was simple, almost too simple. If they could break through the outer line of defense, take down the Calrigar flagship, they could cripple the enemy's command structure and throw their forces into disarray. It was a gamble, but one that had to pay off. All ships fire at will, Walker ordered. The Eagle's wrath surged forward, its weapons blazing, its engines roaring with power. Walker leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the looming flagship. The Calrigar were preparing their final assault, but the human fleet was already inside their perimeter, charging straight at their heart. Plasma beams shot through space like deadly threads, cutting through the dark expanse. A direct hit from the Eagle's wrath tore through the hull of the nearest destroyer. The ship's massive frame twisted under the force, its crew scrambling for cover as it fell apart in space. Target locked on the flagship, Coyle shouted. Ready to fire, Commander. Fire! The blast from the Eagle's wrath streaked across the battlefield, hitting the flagship dead center. A massive explosion rocked the enemy ship, lighting up the void around them with a brilliance that briefly outshone the stars. But the Calrigar flagship held barely. It was still operational, but its shields were compromised. We've got a chance! Walker shouted, his voice fierce with conviction. Finish it off, now! The rest of the fleet followed suit. More plasma fire rained down on the flagship, hammering it into submission. The Calrigar had no choice but to retreat, their flagship crippled, their forces in disarray. But Walker knew this was just the beginning. The Calrigar wouldn't back down so easily. They're retreating for now, Coyle said, breathless. But we've won this round. For the Xylex. We've only delayed the inevitable, Walker replied, his expression hard. We've bought them time. But the war's just beginning. As the enemy forces pulled back, Walker allowed himself a fleeting moment of relief. They had saved the Xylex, today. But the Calrigar were far from done. And neither was humanity. Prepare for the next strike, Walker said, his voice low but determined. We're going to make sure they know what happens when you try to pick a fight with humanity. He stood tall, staring into the distance, knowing that the true battle was still ahead. And this time, humanity would fight with everything they had. The quiet hum of the Eagle's wrath was shattered by a series of deafening explosions. The battle was far from over, and if anything, the stakes had just been raised. The Calrigar fleet, broken but not defeated, was regrouping faster than Walker had anticipated. Commander, incoming fire from the remaining Calrigar ships! Coyle's voice rang out over the comms, sharp and tense. Walker's gaze locked on the holographic display, watching as the last of the Calrigar ships converged around the crippled flagship. They were not retreating, they were preparing for one final, desperate assault. The fact that they were still so organized, after everything, made it clear these enemies were relentless. "We've taken down their command structure, but their tactics haven't changed," Walker said, his voice cold. "They'll fight until every last ship is reduced to ash." The Eagle's wrath bucked under the impact of another plasma blast, the shields flickering dangerously. The entire ship groaned as the shockwaves passed through, sending ripples of stress through the bulkheads. Walker held his ground, his focus razor-sharp. They needed to finish this, now. "Bring all weapons online," Walker ordered, his voice hard. "Target their engines. Take them out before they can regroup." The Eagle's wrath surged forward, cutting through the swirling chaos of space. Enemy fire arced through the void, missing them by mere meters. The ship's cannons roared in return, firing with deadly precision, and the remaining Calrigar ships exploded one by one, their burning husks drifting aimlessly into space. Coyle worked the weapons systems like a maestro, each blast hitting its mark with flawless accuracy. "Direct hit to their forward shields, Commander. Their fleet's getting smaller, but we're not done yet." Walker clenched his jaw as another salvo of enemy fire slammed into the shields. "We've got one chance. Disable their flagship and they'll scatter. We need to hit them hard, before they can regenerate." He glanced toward Coyle, then to the tactical display. The Calrigar flagship loomed ahead, the largest and most imposing of the remaining ships. Despite its damage, it still had the firepower to tear them apart. Walker had no illusions. This wasn't just about stopping the Calrigar fleet. It was about sending a message. "We're going in," Walker said, his voice unwavering. "Prepare for close combat." The crew braced for impact as the Eagle's wrath closed the distance, its massive form cutting through the battlefield like a battering ram. The enemy flagship fired its weapons, but the ship's shields held steady, absorbing the hits with remarkable resilience. "Captain, they're sending out fighter ships!" Lieutenant Coyle reported, her fingers flying across the console. "Swarming us! We're going to need cover." Walker's eyes flashed with resolve. "Let them come. We've got this." He hit the comms. "Squadron leaders, engage the enemy fighters. Protect the Wrath at all costs." Outside, the battle intensified. The Xylix ships had joined the fray, their fleet small but determined. A few made daring strafing runs at the Calrigar destroyers, drawing enemy fire and providing the Eagle's Wrath with the breathing room it needed to close the distance. But it was still a perilous race. As the Wrath got closer to the Calrigar flagship, the enemy ships launched a final counteroffensive. Walker could see the vastness of their firepower, and realized just how close they were to overwhelming them. They needed to strike fast, or this victory would slip through their fingers. "Full power to forward shields and weapons," Walker commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're going in hot." The Eagle's Wrath surged forward, its engines firing at maximum capacity as it dodged incoming blasts. The bridge shuddered as the ship made its final approach, its massive form silhouetted against the distant stars. "Targeting the flagship's main reactor," Coyle announced. "Ready to fire in 3, 2. Walker didn't wait for the countdown to finish. "Fire!" The blast ripped through the darkness, striking the Calrigar flagship's central reactor. The impact sent a shockwave through space, bright enough to briefly blind them. The flagship trembled under the force, its shields flickering, and then, the explosion. The enemy flagship erupted in a brilliant fireball, sending a shockwave that rattled the Eagle's Wrath to its core. The Calrigar fleet was in disarray. Ships began to veer off course, their command structure crippled by the loss of their flagship. It was over. Walker stood motionless, watching the burning wreckage of the Calrigar vessel as the flames continued to pulse through the void. There was a brief silence, an uneasy calm after the chaos, before Coyle's voice broke through. "We did it! The fleet's scattering. We've got them on the run." Walker allowed himself a tight smile, but there was no satisfaction in it, only the grim weight of survival. He turned away from the display, his eyes sweeping over the crew. The battle was won, but it wasn't a victory to celebrate. "We've bought the Xylix time, but the war's not over," Walker said, his voice low. "We've only just shown the Calrigar that we'll fight back. Now we need to make sure they know we'll never stop fighting." Coyle looked at him, her expression a mixture of relief and grim determination. "What now, Commander?" Walker's eyes met hers, his resolve hardening. "Now we take the fight to them. We finish this war on our terms." Outside, the remnants of the Calrigar fleet were breaking apart, their ships limping away, retreating into the dark reaches of space. The Eagle's Wrath and its fleet held their ground, victorious, but the war had only just begun. The Calrigar would regroup. They would rebuild. But humanity had delivered a message they would never forget. And next time, it would be the Calrigar who would feel the full fury of humanity. "Get us back to Earth," Walker commanded. "We've got work to do."